Though Wendy, as a child, was brought up as a churchgoer and a Christian, following the example and principles of her father, who was a church organist, I am not a practicing Christian, though for convenience sake I tend to label myself as an Anglican. But I take a scientific, evidence-based to religious matters, and with some reluctance, I think Wendy has followed my lead. My son is an adamant non-believer. My daughter is neutral. The prospect of Wendy, I was told that Wendy's life expectancy, given her dementia and probably information provided by the home, by the care home, and the medical opinion, was that she was likely to reach the end of her life within hours or days, but possibly 2 to 3 at most. As mentioned earlier, with the onset of Wendy's dementia and the gradual deterioration in her mental faculties, I was very conscious of the deterioration in Wendy's mental condition, and also her physical appearance. She was not as mindful as she had been of the care of her hair, the clothes she was wearing, and increasingly failed to recognise me as a husband, or indeed of anybody she might know or might have known well. I took a fairly relaxed, even disinterested view of this, and with the concerns I was having about the cost of Wendy's care, her decreasing awareness of her surroundings, and her intellect, the people she knew, particularly me, I formed a rather ill-defined view of our decreasing awareness of our emotional bond. That is, the love we'd had, the love and life we'd shared with each other for the past 55 years, I formed a rather scientific view of our relationship being a bond, a set of three main ones: intellectual, financial, and emotional. And I'm ashamed to say this now, but I reasoned with myself that perhaps a logical and acceptable outcome would be Wendy's gradual decline into unconsciousness, sleep, and death, of which she would be unaware. I think this view is shared by other carers whom I'd met in a similar position with loved ones in the care home and elsewhere, to I must add, varying degrees. Some, the bond was still very strong, the desire to care at home for their loved ones. But one or two voiced the view that this desire, this desire to care for their loved one, was born out of not so much what the caree might think of them, but almost an assuagement of the guilt, of a latent guilt feeling that they might have, that they were less caring and less loving of their wives. I wouldn't want to go too closely into that, but it seemed to be a real possibility. So Wendy was ensconced in the room in May Ward, and David, Celia and I more or less took up residence there with the help of a bed a folding bed which we shared, and that was installed in the room, and we shared our time between Wendy's care room, a quiet room that existed in the ward, and the cafeteria and the Smith's general shop in the main part of the hospital. All this time, and I must emphasise this, the nursing staff, and indeed the support staff of May Ward were wonderful. They were considerate of us. They were caring of Wendy, extremely gentle, and not that I would wish to, but I couldn't fault them. I couldn't fault them in any way. They were truly lovely. Wendy's treatment at this time comprised mainly a continuous oxygen feed and a cocktail of medication, both to ease her pain and physical discomfort and to relax her. Every 4 or 5 hours or so, nursing staff would come in and move Wendy around to avoid discomfort from, or the possibility, I think, of bed sores and just the physical discomfort of lying in one position all the time. Wendy seemed to get very distressed after this, and the nursing staff would then give her an extra dose of painkillers or relaxants, in addition to the continuous pump feed that she was receiving. It seemed to Celia, David and me that a better solution would be to give Wendy this top-up dose before they were going to move Wendy around or change her incontinence pad, so that she was relaxed and would not feel any pain or discomfort from moving around. The nursing staff agreed with this and started this procedure, and it eased Wendy's condition greatly. In accordance with what I believe is current practice, Wendy was not receiving food or any, at this point, although she had at the beginning, any intravenous drip. I believe there are sound reasons for this, and Wendy did not display any adverse symptoms as a result of not receiving liquid or any liquid or other nourishment. But it was obvious to us that her condition was declining, and her breathing, after a restful and peaceful, and to us an obvious gentle feeling that was Wendy was going into a slow decline. Her breathing was becoming more laboured. Her pulse rate appeared to be slowing down, and eventually her eyes closed, and seemingly for good. Although Celia was very, very much involved in what we were doing, I found myself discussing Wendy's physical condition far more with David than with Celia. Although I would talk about my feelings, and they would talk about their feelings with what was happening quite freely with me, and I think with each other when I wasn't around. I think they were very aware of my concern. I should add at this point that I found that every time I was talking about Wendy, unusually for me, I would involuntarily choke and start to cry in various degrees, and this was increasingly occurred much more frequently.